Some people on this call are aware of the existence of this book. The book that you bought is in English. And when I read the book, I read it in English. But then I decided I would like to learn to read German and read the book in its original German. The book was written by a German in the 1920s and early 1930s. So when I read it in German, one of the things that struck me is that whenever you read a book, especially a spiritual book or spiritual writing, in one language that are translated to another language, some concepts are lost in translation. So I decided to try my hand at editing doing a new translation in more simple language that a lot of modern day people can understand, because the original translation in English is written in high King's English. For many people, especially American and Canadian or Australian, that English is difficult. So the title of this chapter is Responsibility. It's the first chapter in the second volume. This question is always one of the first, since the vast majority of humans are only too glad to shift every responsibility away from themselves and would rather cast the burden on anything other than themselves. That this in itself is a self-deprecation makes no difference to them. In this, they are really quite humble and modest, but only so that they can go on living even more merrily and unscrupulously. It would indeed be so nice to be allowed to fulfill all their wishes and to let all their desires run riot at the expense of other humans, unruffled, without having to atone for it. If necessary, the earthly laws can be circumvented and conflicts avoided. Under the mantle of the earthly laws, those who are more clever can even net quite a successful haul and do many a thing which would not hold up to any moral scrutiny. In this, they often even enjoy the reputation of being especially capable humans. With a little shrewdness, one could live really cozily according to their own ideas, if there were not something somewhere which aroused an uncomfortable sensing, a rising disquiet from time to time, which appears to show that some things could indeed, after all, be different from one's own wishes. And it is indeed so. The reality is serious and unrelenting. In this respect, the wishes of humans can bring about no deviation whatsoever. The law remains implacable. You know what implacable means? It means you can't beg your way out of it. The law remains implacable. What the human sows, that shall he reap many times over. These few words contain and say a lot more than many imagine. They correspond extremely precisely and accurately to the real process of the reciprocal effect which rests in creation. One could find no better expression that hits the point. Just as the harvest yields a multiple of the seed, so does the human again and again always encounter a multiple of whatever he has awakened and sent out in his intuitive sensing according to the nature of his volition. Volition is your intention. So think the word intention. Therefore, the human spiritually bears the responsibility for everything he does. This responsibility already sets in with the decision, not only with the completed deed, which indeed is only a consequence of the decision. And the decision is the awakening of a serious volition. There is no separation between this side and the so called other side. Rather, everything is only one single immense existence. Now, we call it the beyond, the other side. Call it what you will, where you go when you leave this place. It is one single immense existence. The entire vast creation, visible and invisible to humans, fits together like an amazingly skillful, never failing mechanism, gearing into each other. Side by side, uniform laws carry the entirety. Like nerve strands, they penetrate everything, hold everything together, and trigger one another in constant reciprocal effect. Now, when in this respect, schools and churches speak of heaven and hell, of God and the devil, this is, in a way, correct. But as an explanation of good and evil powers, it is wrong. That must throw every earnest seeker into errors and doubt. For where there are two powers, there must logically also be two masters. Thus, in this case, two gods, a good one and an evil one. And that is not the case. There is only one creator, one God, and for this reason also, only one power which flows through, enlivens, and promotes everything that exists. This pure creative power of God perpetually flows through the entire creation, rests in it, is inseparable from it. It is to be found everywhere, in the air, in every drop of water, in the growing rock, the struggling plant, the animal, and naturally also in the human. There is nothing in which it would not be found. And as it flows through everything, it also streams through the human unceasingly. Now, the human is so constituted that he resembles a lens. Just as a lens gathers the sun rays streaming through it, concentrating and transmitting them so that the heat giving rays converge on one point, singe, ignite, and burst into flames. So does the human due to his peculiar constitution gather and concentrate the creation power streaming through him, through his intuitive sense, and guides it further, more concentratedly, through his thoughts. Therefore, depending on the nature of this intuitive sensing and the thoughts connected to it, he guides the automatically effective creative power of God to good or evil outcome. And this is the responsibility which the human must bear. In this also lies his free will. Now I'm going to take a little break and talk a little bit about evil. When it says he guides the automatically effective creative power of God to good or evil outcome. Many of us think of evil, in a very narrow sense. And if we think of good in a narrow sense, then we lose a lot of the meaning of everything that is. That which is evil is the opposite of that which is good. But how do we decide what is good? Is it that which causes us happiness? Good simply means that which is in alignment, because nature is what we depend on for our very existence and our very well-being. And we know that the laws are what determine our well-being. So anything that is in alignment, the laws of creation, if you start to think of it that way, is good. Anything that goes against the laws will not bring us well-being and is the opposite of good. Start to practice not necessarily that which makes me feel great, but that which is in accordance with the law, because the outcome will always be according to the law. Then you will be assured of a quote unquote good outcome. Moving on. You who so often seek convulsively to find the right path, why do you make it so difficult for yourselves? Visualize this picture in all simplicity. How the pure power of the Creator flows through you, and how you guide it with your thoughts in the good or evil direction. There, you have it all without exertion and without head racking. Consider that it all lies in your simple intuitive sensing and thinking, whether this enormous power will now give rise to good or evil. What beneficial or ruinous power is given to you with this? You need not strain yourselves until beads of sweat appear on your brow. Nor do you need to convulsively cling to some so-called occult practice in order, through every possible and impossible physical and spiritual contortion, to achieve some level which is completely irrelevant for your true spiritual upswing. Stop this time-wasting trifling, which has already so often become painful torture, which represents nothing more than the earlier self-flagellation and self-castigation in the monasteries. It is just a different form of the same thing, which can bring you just as little gain. The so-called occult masters and students are modern Pharisees in the truest sense of the word. They give the truest reflection of the Pharisees in the time of Jesus of Nazareth. Consider with pure joy that through your simple and good-willing intuitive sensing and thinking, you are able to effortlessly guide the one enormous creation power. The power then takes effect precisely according to the nature of your intuitive sensing and your thoughts. It works all by itself. You only need to guide it. This happens in all simplicity and straightforwardness. It requires no learnedness, not even reading and writing. It is given to each of you in equal measure. In this, there are no differences. Just as a child playing with a switch is able to turn on an electric current with a tremendous effect, so is it given to you as a gift to guide divine power through your simple thoughts. You can rejoice over it, can be proud of it, as long as you use it for good. But tremble if you fritter it away uselessly, or use it at all for what is impure. For you cannot evade the law of reciprocal effect, which rests in creation. And even if you had the wings of the morning, the hand of the Lord, whose power you have thus misused, would strike you through this automatically working reciprocal effect wherever you wished to hide. Evil is brought into effect with the same pure divine power as good. And the nature of the use of this uniform power, which is at each person's disposal, is what carries the responsibility which no one is able to evade. Therefore, I call out to all seekers, keep the heart of your thoughts pure. With this, you establish peace and are happy. Rejoice, you ignorant and weak ones, for to you is given the same power as to the strong. Therefore, do not make it so difficult for yourselves. Do not forget that the pure self-creative power of God also streams through you, and that you too, as humans, are able to give this power a definite direction through the nature of your inner intuitive sensing. Thus, the nature of your volition towards good as well as towards evil. It is able to be destructive or upbuilding, bringing joy or suffering. Since there is only this one power of God, it also clears up the mystery of why in every serious final struggle, the darkness must yield before the light, evil before good. When you guide the power of God towards good, then it remains unclouded in its original purity. And through this, it develops a much greater power. Whereas, with clouding into the impure, a weakening simultaneously occurs. So, in any final battle, the purity of the power will always have an incisive effect and be decisive for the outcome. Okay, I'm going to digress a little here. When we talk about the purity of the power is always there. The power is always pure. It's how we use the power, the kind of thought that we put the power into. When we use the power that is in creation to produce thoughts, the purer, clearer, the more upward directed the thought is, the stronger the power will be of that thought, the more effect in an upward direction. Going back, everyone feels to the fingertips what is good and what is evil without a word said. To brood over it would cause confusion. Dull brooding is a waste of power. Like a swamp, like a tenacious morass, it clasps, paralyzes, and suffocates everything within its reach. Refreshing cheerfulness, however, dispels the gloom of brooding. You need not be sad and depressed. Every moment you can begin on the path towards the heights and make good the past, whatever it may be. Do nothing more than think of the process of the pure power of God always streaming through you. Then you yourselves will shrink from guiding this purity into the dirty canals of evil thoughts, because you can attain to the highest and the noblest in the same way without strain. You only need to guide it. The power then takes effect alone in the direction you want. With this, you have happiness or unhappiness in your own hand. Therefore, proudly hold your head up and be free and bold. Evil cannot approach you if you do not call for it. As you wish it, as you want it, so will it happen to you. This book, like I said, it completely transformed my life. But it transformed it by transforming the way in which I think. It's not like the book has the ability to change your circumstance. In reading it, it forces you to re examine your outlook, what you have always thought and believed. And this is only one chapter out of many chapters. Everything in this book addresses every aspect of the human existence. Every aspect. There isn't a single aspect that you will not find something inside this book that helps you understand that aspect of existence better and gives you tools to navigate it But to read the book is not easy. You have to start with the first volume. Like I said, this book comes in 3 volumes. This is the first volume. This is how thin the first volume is. This is the second volume. It gets thicker as you go along. See this one? The hardest one to read. Because this one takes a sledgehammer and shatters everything you always thought or believed. Everything. Everything you always thought you knew or understood or believed. And this is the most difficult one for everybody. But the first thing that needs to happen is you need to break down all your preconceived notions. You have to start understanding life differently from the way you have always thought about it. Once you say to yourself, okay, everything I thought I knew, get rid of it. Take this big basket of beliefs, put it down. Put it all down. Unzip yourself, reach inside, take everything out of yourself, throw it away. And start out with, I'm agnostic. I don't know anything. I don't believe anything. I don't understand anything. And I'm going to start from square one. Then you start reading and say to yourself, every time I read something, I will go out there and I'll look around me. I'll observe other people around me. Don't observe yourself, because we're unable to be objective when it comes to our own selves. But observe other people. Observe your friends, observe your co-workers, observe your children, observe the world, politics, school, church, the friends you go for hikes with, your relatives. And every time you read a chapter, just, observe them and see how whatever you read in that chapter is playing out in these people's behavior and their lives. That's the first step. And then you come home and you think to yourself, oh, wow, is that so very true what this chapter just told me? Only after that, when you've come to realize that it's true, that it actually shows and manifests in all these people's lives and behavior, or behavior and lives, then you can say to yourself, well, if it's true for all these other people, then it must be true for me. And that will be the first step for you. Then, as you read, you begin to observe yourself. Oh, wow, I read such and such and such. Okay, you read the book, you go down, you put it down, you go about your daily life, but keep in the back of your mind what you read. When something happens, you have a thought, and then you see the result, the effect, and you're like, it is really true that this is how it works. The more you become constantly aware, the easier and easier it becomes to just know from deep within you. This goes in alignment with the laws. This does not. This is what I'm going to expect to get back from it. This is what I'm going to expect to get back from that. Then the wish of the one person who says, I wish I could live in total trust of the unknown becomes your reality. And anything that is happening to you now, you know that the law is just returning to you something that you have put out. Even when we feel that others are doing things that affect our lives in a way that causes us pain, we had created the circumstance that allowed that situation to arise in the first place. So we are partially responsible. Even when we feel like the others out there are the ones responsible, that's not the whole story. We have a part in that story. I know for me, that was the hardest part, was reading that first volume that kept pointing out to me again and again and again and again, you're wrong. You think this, you're wrong. You think that, you're wrong. Once I was able to accept, okay, I'm wrong, I can actually begin to change it. So you can get this book from this website. I would urge anyone who is not reading it to read it. My advice is read it slowly. And while you're reading it, consider it a lifetime experience. Literally, a lifetime experience. If you try to read the second or the third volume without reading the first, it'll be like Greek to you. You will not be able to understand it because it's like learning a whole new language. You have to first learn the rudimentary grammar of the language. That's what the first volume is for you, for each one of us.
Well, as an a former lawyer, I am now very reticent about laws. And I find laws to be very masculine. And while laws are very useful, I've also realized that this book was written by man, and also that there are many feminine aspects, I believe, what you would consider feminine aspects like compassion and patience and, all those things, sometimes missing in the discussion of laws. And so I just wanted to bring that up because I feel like an important aspect of being able to change is to be compassionate with ourselves and understand that our thoughts, um, it's not to bring more shame and guilt into ourselves about having thoughts or having done things in the past or the actions, but the ability to forgive ourselves for that. Um, so I just wanted to add that because I have been on this journey and I have found that to be really important part of moving forward and changing is the ability to bring in those feminine aspects of self-love.
In our world, we have what we call earthly laws. These laws are passed by human beings. They come up with ideas and they pass along. Under, under ideal circumstances, a law is a principle under which, when you live according to that principle, you know what the outcome will always be. The outcome will always be the same. That's what makes it a law. So we could say the principles of creation and not use the word law. Okay, that's the first thing. But humans have created laws that are contrary to the principles of creation and call them laws. And those who create them themselves do not even abide by those. So it's important for us to separate in our minds. If a law is created that is not aligned with the principles of creation, it will still bring a result. It's just that the result it will bring, according to the principles of creation, will be confusion, distress, pain, suffering. The principles of creation are true laws. And by definition, a law is something which, if you do this, this is the result you will always get. If you do that, that's the result you will always get. That's what makes it a law. In creation, in life, these principles are therefore laws. We have misused our language in so many different ways. And that could be a whole other meeting when we talk about our language and how our language has developed. Now, going back to the issue of feminine, masculine, yes, this book was written by a man who lived at a time when to be able to get out and function in the public, in the world as it was, he needed to be a man, because that is the way the society had been established up until then. So we have to kind of look at the world in which we live. The third and last thing I'll say is that when you say we need to think about the past, with some compassion for ourselves and forgive ourselves, true. But the purpose of this talk is, how do you bring about a transformation? You can forgive yourself for what has happened, but that doesn't give you the tools to change. It's like, okay, I've got it. I admit this was all, this is what I did and this is what came out of it. The real question is, what are you going to do now? What are you going to do now? And it's what you're going to do now that matters. What you did then doesn't matter. You're going through whatever you're going through because of what you did then. But what matters is what you're going to go through tomorrow. And what you're going to go through tomorrow is completely determined by what you're doing now. And the law, unfortunately or fortunately, does not take no for an answer. That's, if you can leave this meeting with one thing in your mind, it's the law is permanent. The principles of nature are permanent, unchanging. Nature has given me the most precious gift, and that most precious gift is the free will and the ability to create thoughts, which then take effect and create my reality. Just think of it that way.
The woman's issue is very important for me. Asian women need to be rise up and educated, because the woman is very important. When she talks about feminism, that's what I was thinking. Woman influences their fathers, their husbands, their children, they educate next generation. So it's very important that women need to be educated to educate next generation. And it shouldn't be a shameful thing for women being a woman.
I just want to be sure I heard you correctly, or I got it into myself correctly, God's not out there judging right now and saying, okay, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys,
No.
or whatever you choose to call God. And the power, the energy, so I'm going to use words that you can argue with, but God put this energy here. Everybody has access to it, the good guys and the bad guys. Who are the bad guys? And
We're all the bad guys. And we're all the bad guys. Okay? And when Jesus said, love thy neighbor as thyself, Jesus knew about these three laws. Anything you wish for your neighbor is really what you're wishing for yourself. You think you're wishing it for your neighbor, but you're really wishing it for yourself. Everything you do to your neighbor, you're really doing to yourself. That's the bottom line. Okay? So just think, is this an alignment with the laws of creation, with the laws of God, with the laws of nature? It's all one and the same thing.
I think one of the most profound things you've said, Dr. Kenzie, along those lines that has helped me in the past is that at one of the conferences, you described life as being in a banquet and a beautiful celebration of a banquet. And that at a banquet, would you throw food around? Would you get in a fight? Would you, you know, that's for me, that has been so profound in understanding how we behave on this earth.
I learn a lot myself each time. So thank you for teaching me and contributing your energy to this.